The sea had become Logan Pierce's last refuge, a drifting world of salt, silence, and ghosts. For years, the former Navy SEAL sailed with only his dog, Ranger, and the whisper of waves to keep his memories at bay. But that morning, Ranger wouldn't stop growling at the fog. Then Logan saw it, 3 enormous letters carved into the sand, dark and deliberate. SOS. Someone out there was still alive, or something wanted him to believe they were. We invite you to support us by subscribing to the channel. The morning mist lay thick over the Atlantic, turning the world into a watercolor of gray and pale blue. The old fishing boat Mariner's Rest rocked gently on the tide, its hull groaning like an old man's bones. Logan Pierce stood at the bow, one hand wrapped around a rusted railing, the other holding a tin cup of black coffee gone cold long ago. He was a man built from storms, broad-shouldered, in his early 40s, with short-cropped dark hair streaked with gray and a jaw roughened by 3 days' stubble. His eyes were a piercing steel blue, the kind that had seen too much and no longer looked for comfort. Once, those eyes had scanned horizons for enemies in the deserts of Afghanistan. Now they searched only the endless gray of the ocean, where nothing looked back. Years of service as a Navy SEAL had carved discipline into his every motion, but also left behind a hollow that no mission could fill. The scars on his arms and the faint limp in his left leg were the physical remnants of a blast outside Kabul, yet the real wound lay deeper, unseen, stitched with guilt and ghosts. It was the memory of Adrian Cole, his closest brother-in-arms, who had died under his command. That night still replayed in his head, the radio static, the scream for help, the silence that followed. Logan had lived, and Adrian had not. That truth haunted every breath of salt air he took. Beside him, stretched across the deck with watchful amber eyes, lay Ranger, a 6-year-old German shepherd, with a thick gray and tan coat, and the posture of a soldier at ease yet never off duty. His fur was darker along his back, almost black, and the faint white streak on his muzzle gave him an air of quiet wisdom. Ranger had served alongside Logan overseas as a K-9 unit trained to detect explosives and danger long before a man's senses could. He bore a small scar across his flank, the reminder of a shrapnel wound from their last mission together. Like Logan, he carried his trauma silently. They were 2 souls bound not by ownership, but by survival. The boat's small radio crackled uselessly in the corner of the cabin, its wires exposed, corroded by salt and neglect. Logan didn't mind the silence. It had become his shield. After retiring, he sold everything except the boat and disappeared from the maps. He fished just enough to live, drank when he couldn't sleep, and pretended the ocean waves could wash away his memories. But the sea, vast and patient, never forgets, it only reflects. The sun hadn't broken through the fog when Ranger's ears twitched. The dog rose suddenly, muscles tightening beneath his fur. He let out a low, uneasy whine. Logan turned, eyebrows furrowed. "What is it, boy?" The shepherd padded to the edge of the deck, nose pointed toward the east. Beyond the mist, the faint outline of land shimmered, a small, jagged island surrounded by foam-tipped waves. Logan frowned. He knew these waters well. There was no inhabited island, within 20 miles. Still, something about the shape tugged at a memory. He grabbed his binoculars and focused through the veil of fog. At first, he saw only rocks and driftwood. Then, his breath caught. On the beach, large pieces of wood and broken logs had been arranged into a single, unmistakable message, 3 crude letters carved into the earth itself. SOS. Logan froze. The metal of the binoculars was cold against his skin, but he barely felt it. The letters were fresh. The tide hadn't yet erased them. Someone out there needed help. For a long moment, he stood motionless, caught between instinct and exhaustion. The Navy SEAL in him screamed to act, to move. The broken man in him wanted to turn away, to protect the fragile peace he'd built from silence. His jaw tightened as Ranger barked once sharp, urgent, commanding. It was the same bark that had once meant danger ahead. He set down his cup, exhaled slowly, and muttered, "Not today." But even as he said it, he knew the lie. He could no more ignore that signal than he could erase his past. The weight of his training, his conscience, and Adrian's voice pressed on him like an anchor. He started the boat's engine. The old diesel motor coughed, spat smoke, then came alive with a trembling growl. Ranger stood beside him, tail low but steady, his gaze fixed on the fog-shrouded island ahead. As they drew closer, the sea grew restless. Waves slapped against the bow, and the air turned colder. The island revealed itself slowly, a rugged outcrop of black rock and twisted pines. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries echoing through the mist like warnings. Logan felt his stomach knot. He'd seen islands like this before, in faraway war zones, small, forgotten places where terrible things happened and no one came to write them down. He anchored the boat in a shallow cove, the motor's growl dying into silence. The sound of the ocean filled the void, rhythmic and eternal. Ranger leapt from the deck, first landing lightly on the wet sand, his nose immediately to the ground. Logan followed, boots sinking into the cold surf. Up close, the SOS. Letters were even more disturbing, built from heavy driftwood, each log dark with seawater and streaked with something that looked too much like blood. A shiver ran through him. "Whoever did this," he murmured, "was desperate." The dog sniffed the nearest log and let out a low, uncertain growl. Logan scanned the tree-line thick, dark evergreens that swayed slightly in the wind. No movement, no voices, only the faint creak of branches. He adjusted the strap of his worn leather jacket, the same one he'd worn since his service days. The weight of the past clung to him as tangibly as the damp air. Something inside him stirred a spark of the soldier he'd buried. He didn't want to be that man anymore. The man who kicked indoors, who made promises he couldn't keep, who watched good men die because of choices he made. But, standing there, staring at that signal of despair, he felt the old rhythm return, the heartbeat that said, "There's someone out there, and they need you." He crouched beside the letters, touching the wood. It was cold, slick, and fresh, maybe built within the last day. "Someone's still alive," he whispered. Ranger's ears flicked back, as if understanding. The fog rolled in again, swallowing the horizon. For a fleeting moment, Logan thought he saw movement among the trees, a figure, or perhaps just the wind. He blinked, and it was gone. The island seemed to breathe, to watch. The sea lapped softly against the shore, and he realized he was no longer just a passerby. Whether he wanted it or not, he had crossed an invisible line. Ranger barked once more, louder this time, his fur bristling. Logan's pulse quickened. "Easy, boy," he said, though his own voice was tight. He turned back toward the Mariner's Rest, its faded paint and rusted railings barely visible through the mist. The boat that had been his refuge now looked small and fragile against the looming island. He clenched his fists, forcing his breathing to slow. The war had taken much from him, friends, purpose, peace, but it hadn't taken his instinct to protect. He looked down at Ranger, whose eyes gleamed like amber coals. "All right," Logan said quietly. "Let's see who's calling for help." Together, man and dog stepped off the beach and into the shadows of the pines, leaving the SOS behind like a gravestone. The mist thickened as Logan and Ranger left the beach behind. The letters SOS fading into the gray like ghosts swallowed by fog. The air was sharp and wet, filled with the scent of pine, salt, and something else, something metallic. Logan's boots sank into the damp soil, muffled with every step. His breath came slow, steady, measured, but his heart had taken on the rhythm of an old mission. Cautious advance, eyes scanning, senses stretched thin. The silence here wasn't natural. It felt like the island itself was holding its breath. Ranger moved ahead, his paws whispering against the pine needles. The dog's tail was level, his body tense but focused. Every few steps, he paused, lifted his head, and sniffed the air. His training still lived in him, like muscle memory, Methodical, precise. Logan followed, his hand hovering near the pistol, holstered beneath his weathered leather jacket. The weapon was old, a Sig Sauer from his service days, but it still felt like an extension of his hand. He hadn't fired it in years. He prayed he wouldn't have to now. The forest swallowed them whole. Gray light filtered through the high canopy, turning everything a muted silver. Branches hung low, dripping from the mist. Insects were absent. Even the ocean's roar had dimmed into a distant hum. Logan could hear only the soft crunch of Ranger's steps and the faint whisper of his own breathing. Every sense sharpened, the way it used to on night raids overseas. The island reminded him of a mission gone wrong in the Kunar Valley. Same stillness before the ambush, same taste of metal on the tongue. He forced the memory away. Halfway up a narrow incline, Ranger stopped abruptly, his ears pricked, nostrils flaring. Logan froze. The dog's low growl rolled out, barely audible but full of warning. Logan followed the direction of his gaze and saw it. Half buried, near the roots of a tree, a hunting knife. The handle was black composite, the blade wide and dulled by rust, but the dried reddish stain along its edge was unmistakable. Blood. Logan crouched, examining it without touching. The handle bore faint grooves. Someone had gripped it tight, hard. There were drag marks in the dirt nearby, long and erratic, as if something or someone had been pulled through the underbrush. Ranger whined softly. "Yeah," Logan muttered. "I see it too." His pulse picked up. He wasn't looking at a relic of time. This was recent. He glanced at the footprints, some human, some animal, but the rainless ground had preserved them poorly. Still, there was movement, struggle, panic. He stood, scanning the tree line. The fog shifted with the wind, revealing a flicker of color in the distance, something out of place. He moved toward it, each step deliberate. Ranger padded beside him, the dog's body low, eyes alive with alertness. The color resolved into fabric, a torn piece of yellow rain jacket, snagged on a thorny bush. He took it in his gloved hand. The nylon was still damp but warm, holding the faint trace of perfume mixed with seawater. A woman's scent. The forest thinned as they climbed higher, and the faint outline of a small clearing came into view. A ruined campsite sat at its center. A collapsed blue tent, an extinguished fire pit ringed with wet stones and scattered belongings, boots, a dented metal mug, a canteen, a notebook swollen with water. Logan knelt beside the fire pit. It was cold, the ash still soft, meaning the fire had died less than a day ago. He felt the familiar knot tighten in his stomach. Whoever built this camp had left in a hurry. Or been forced to. He opened the notebook carefully. The pages clung together, the ink running in places. The first legible line stopped him cold. "This belongs to Clara Monroe." The handwriting was neat, elegant, but hurried near the end. The next few lines were dated simple entries about sailing with her husband, Ethan, along the coast. A sudden storm. The boat wrecked. Then desperation. "We made it to an island. No radio signal. Ethan hurt his leg badly. We built an SOS from driftwood." Logan's eyes traced each word, his throat tight. The last entry ended abruptly mid-sentence, the final line smeared by what could have been tears or rain. He looked up at the empty clearing. "Clara," he whispered, as if the trees might answer. Then he heard it faint, distant, a sound carried by the wind. A groan. Human. Ranger's head snapped up. The dog's ears locked forward, body vibrating with focus. Logan motioned with 2 fingers, the silent signal they'd used countless times. Lead. Ranger moved, weaving between the trees. The sound came again, more distinct, this time a low, pained moan. Logan's pulse quickened as he followed, his hand brushing against his weapon. They broke through a line of underbrush and came to a narrow ravine where the ground sloped sharply downward. At the bottom lay a man. He was half covered in leaves and mud, his left leg twisted unnaturally. His face was pale under a film of grime, his hair matted, dark with sweat and blood. He looked to be in his late 30s, tall but gaunt, with a once handsome face now carved by exhaustion. His beard was uneven, more neglect than style. The man's clothes, expensive sailing gear, torn at the knees and elbows, stood out like a scar in the wilderness. Logan slid down the slope. "Easy," he called out, voice low but steady. "Don't move." The man stirred, opening gray eyes clouded with pain and fear. Who are you?" His voice cracked, raw from thirst. "Name's Logan Pierce," he replied. "I saw your SOS. You the one who made it?" The man hesitated, then nodded weakly. "Yes, my wife, Clara. She's gone. They took her." Logan's jaw tightened. "Who's they?" But the man only groaned, clutching his leg. The wound was deep, a gash down to the bone, jagged and swollen. He had tried to wrap it with a torn sleeve, but the fabric was soaked through. Infection had already set in. Logan removed his jacket, tore off the inner lining, and made a tighter bandage. He worked quickly, his hands steady, his mind racing. "You're lucky to be alive," he muttered. "How long you been here?" The man swallowed hard. "Since the storm. 2 days. Maybe 3. They came from a boat. Smugglers, maybe. They found us. Took Clara. Left me for dead." His words hung heavy in the air. Logan's instincts stirred. He'd heard every kind of lie in interrogation rooms and battlefield confessions. Something in the man's tone didn't sit right, but he pushed it aside for now. "We'll get you up," Logan said. "We'll find her." He hoisted the man, Ethan, if his story was true, over his shoulder, feeling the weight press into old injuries. Ranger trotted ahead, pausing to glance back, ears flicking. They reached the clearing again. Logan set Ethan down near the fire pit, his breath ragged. The man looked around the ruins of the camp, eyes glassy. She was right here," he whispered. "They dragged her that way." He pointed toward the northern ridge, a dark mass of trees rising steeply against the mist. Logan followed his gaze and felt the cold twist deeper into his chest. Somewhere beyond that ridge, a woman might be waiting or already gone. He looked at Ranger, who was staring in the same direction, muscles taut, nose twitching. "We'll find her," Logan said softly, mostly to himself. "But first, we make sure you live." Ranger sat beside him, amber eyes unwavering, as the first drops of rain began to fall. Rain drifted through the trees in soft, whispering sheets, dampening the earth and swallowing sound. Logan crouched by the remnants of the campfire, his breath rising in faint clouds, the damp air clinging to his skin. Ranger lay beside him, his fur slick and darkened by moisture, his amber eyes fixed on the tree line as if expecting the forest itself to move. The fire pit had long gone cold, and everything around them carried the eerie stillness of a place left behind in fear. The only light came from the dull gray sky filtering through the mist. Logan opened the waterlogged journal again, shielding it from the rain with his body. The handwriting of Clara Monroe was elegant but uneven now, ink bleeding in places like veins under the paper's skin. He turned the pages slowly, careful not to tear them. The entries began like something from a travel diary. "The sea was calm when we left Bar Harbor. Ethan said it would be the start of something new." There were small sketches in the redoute, margins a bird, a lighthouse, the outline of a sail. The early pages smelled faintly of lavender and salt, but as Logan flipped forward, the tone shifted. The storm came without warning. "Waves higher than the mast." Ethan hit his leg. "The radio is dead. The island has no sound. We built a fire last night, but it went out before dawn. I think someone is watching us." The next pages were written faster, the script jagged and hard to read. A boat appeared today. 2 men, one older, with a limp, one younger, dark eyes. They said they were lost too. Ethan wanted to trust them. I didn't. They smiled too easily. Logan's stomach tightened. He remembered the blood on the knife, the dragged footprints, the half-buried evidence of panic. He turned one more page. The ink was smeared into dark lines, but the words were still visible. They said they'd bring food. That was 2 nights ago. They haven't come back. The older one looked at me like he already owned everything on this island. I told Ethan we should leave the beach. He said I was just scared. Maybe I am, but fear keeps you alive. Logan exhaled, the weight of the journal pressing against his palms. It wasn't just a record, it was a warning. He rose slowly, scanning the clearing again. The tent's fabric flapped weakly in the wind, the yellow poncho still caught on the bush. A shape caught his eye, a small metal chain half buried in the mud, near the log where the journal had been found. He bent down and picked it up. A pendant, oval-shaped, silver, engraved with a single letter, C. A faint warmth lingered on the metal, though it might have been his imagination. Ranger sniffed at it, then gave a soft whine. "Yeah," Logan murmured. "She was here, and she was scared." A rustle came from behind. He turned, hand instinctively dropping to his sidearm, but it was Ethan Monroe, hobbling toward him with the help of a makeshift crutch fashioned from a branch. His face was paler now, lips drawn tight, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Mud streaked his cheek where he'd fallen earlier. "What did you find?" His voice trembled, but not entirely from weakness. There was something rehearsed in the tone-controlled panic. Logan studied him for a moment before answering. "Her journal." He held it up. "She wrote about 2 men from a boat. Said they came here after the storm." One limped. Ethan's expression didn't change much, but there was the briefest flicker, a flash of recognition before he masked it with despair. She must have been delirious," he said too quickly. "She was terrified. You can't trust what someone writes when they're scared." Logan didn't reply. He had seen liars of all kinds, terrorists under interrogation, deserters trying to survive, but few could lie while bleeding. And yet, Ethan did. His wound was real enough, but his story had edges that didn't fit. Ranger moved closer, his nose twitching. The dog's hackles bristled slightly, a sign Logan had learned never to ignore. "You said they took her," Logan said evenly. "But you didn't mention there were 2 of them, or that one was injured." Ethan swallowed, eyes darting toward the trees. "I didn't think it mattered." The rain intensified, drumming softly on the collapsed tent. Logan stepped closer, his height and steadiness casting a quiet pressure. "It matters if one of them's still on this island." The silence stretched. Ethan looked down, his jaw tight, then said, "You think I'm lying?" "I think," Logan said, "you're not telling me everything." Before the tension could deepen, Ranger's sudden growl shattered the quiet. The dog turned sharply toward the northern ridge. Logan followed his gaze. Between the pines, a faint movement, something human-sized, a flicker of gray fabric, gone in a blink. "Stay here," Logan ordered, but Ethan reached out, gripping his sleeve with trembling fingers. "Don't go up there," he rasped. "Please." Logan's voice dropped low. "Why not?" Ethan's eyes were wide now, fear raw and real. Because that's where they dragged her." Ranger was already moving, the low rumble in his chest growing. Logan drew his pistol, the metal cold against his palm, and advanced into the trees. The slope rose steeply, the ground slick with mud. Every sound echoed the creak of branches, the crunch of boots, Ranger's steady breathing. The deeper they went, the more the air changed. It smelled of salt and decay, tinged with something faintly chemical, like diesel. Then, in a narrow clearing, Logan saw the remains of another fire pit. But this one was different, surrounded by cans, tools, a torn tarp. Whoever had been here had stayed longer. Something metallic glinted beside a rock. He crouched and found a flare gun, rusted but functional. Nearby lay a half-empty can of beans, its lid jaggedly cut, the inside black with mold. Whoever used this site had been desperate but resourceful. He pocketed the flare gun, eyes narrowing as he noticed tracks leading downhill, 2 distinct sets of footprints, one heavier than the other. He followed them until they vanished near the edge of a cliff overlooking the northern shore. Below, through the thinning fog, he saw it. The skeletal outline of a boat, half submerged near the rocks. The vessel was old, its hull scarred and tilted, one side buried in the surf. Through the fog, He could make out a faded name along the bow. The Providence. A line of black smoke curled weakly from somewhere inside. Someone was down there. He turned back toward the forest. "Ranger!" The dog bounded up, splattered with mud but alert. Logan knelt, placing a hand on the shepherd's neck. "Someone's here," he murmured. "Alive." Ranger's tail stiffened. They both looked down the slope again. The fog shifted, revealing a faint orange glow from the wreck. Behind them, a voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't have come this far." Logan spun, pistol raised. Ethan stood at the edge of the clearing, rain streaking down his face. But something in his expression had changed. Gone was the weakness. His posture was straighter, his tone cold. "They'll see the dog," he said softly. "And if they see the dog, they'll know I talked to you." The forest seemed to close around them, heavy and breathing. Logan's pulse steadied as he stepped between Ranger and Ethan. "Then you better start talking fast," he said. But Ethan only shook his head, eyes full of something between guilt and dread. "You don't understand," he whispered. "She's not the one who needs saving." The next rumble of thunder drowned his words, and in that echoing roar, Logan felt the shape of something larger, something deadly, stirring beneath the island's fog. The storm had settled into a heavy drizzle, the kind that made everything shimmer and bleed at the edges. The forest was darker now, painted in shades of blue and black, as the last of daylight disappeared behind the ridge. Logan stood by the collapsed tent, the journal tucked safely in his jacket, while Ranger sat alert beside him, the dog's fur spiked with rain. In the distance, thunder rolled lazily over the sea. Ethan Monroe sat by the remains of the campfire, his crutch propped against a tree, the flickering light from Logan's small lantern dancing across his pale face. His leg wound looked bad, angry red swelling beneath the dirty bandage, but something about it bothered Logan. The fabric was torn but not soaked through. The edges were too clean. He had seen countless battlefield wounds, and this one didn't behave like a fresh injury. Ethan's voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't have gone up there," he said softly. Logan didn't respond. He sat across from him, elbows resting on his knees, eyes unreadable beneath the shadow of his cap. "You found it, didn't you?" Ethan pressed. "The boat." Logan looked up, his tone calm but edged. "Yeah, the Providence. Funny name for a smuggler's vessel." Ethan flinched, his fingers tightening on his knee. "You don't understand those men. They weren't supposed to be here." Logan raised an eyebrow. "And you were?" The wind rustled through the trees, and the sound of the ocean pulsed faintly in the distance like a heartbeat. Ethan exhaled shakily. "We didn't mean to land here. The storm drove us. I thought they'd help us. I was wrong." He looked down, his voice trembling at just the right pitch to sound believable. But Logan had interrogated men who lied for their lives. He knew the rhythm of deceit, the tiny hesitations between words. "Your wife's handwriting says different," Logan said. He pulled the journal halfway out of his pocket. "She wrote that. You trusted them, that they frightened her." Ethan's eyes darted toward the book, and for the first time, anger cracked through the mask. "You read it?" "Someone had to," Logan said simply. "She left it for a reason." For a long time, neither spoke. Only the rain tapping the canvas of the ruined tent filled the silence. Then Ethan's tone shifted, calmer, lower, colder. "You think I'm lying," he said. Logan didn't answer. Ranger gave a low growl, the kind that came from deep in the chest. The dog had been watching Ethan since they'd met, never relaxing, never looking away. Now, his teeth showed slightly, glinting in the lantern's light. "Call him off," Ethan said, his voice rising. "He's not going to touch you unless I tell him to," Logan replied evenly. "Which depends on how straight you start talking." Ethan laughed, once short, bitter. "You're still a soldier, aren't you? I can see it. The way you move, the way you look at, everything like it's a target." Logan's gaze stayed steady. "I was. Now, I just want to get off this damn island." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Then you'll need me. You think you can navigate that storm alone? The currents will rip your boat apart before you're out of sight." He smirked faintly. You need me more than you think. Logan studied him for a long moment, weighing words the way he once weighed gunfire and cover. Ethan's confidence didn't match his wound or his supposed trauma. You know this place, Logan said finally. It wasn't a question. Ethan's silence was answer enough. Suddenly, Ranger stiffened, head turning toward the darkness beyond the camp. Logan rose instantly, pistol drawn, his body lowering into a combat stance born from reflex. Movement, he murmured. Ranger moved ahead, quiet as shadow. A shape emerged from the fog, a tall figure carrying a lantern, its yellow glow swaying like a ghost's heartbeat. Logan aimed. Don't move. The figure froze. Then a rough, gravelly voice answered, Easy, friend. No need to point that thing. The man stepped forward into the dim light. He was in his 50s, broad-shouldered but hunched, wearing a torn navy coat and a weather-beaten cap pulled low. His beard was thick and streaked with white, his skin tanned and cracked by salt and years of hard labor. His eyes pale, almost colorless, seemed to look through rather than at people. There was something in them that spoke of both weariness and cruelty. My name's Jonas Reed, he said. I used to run the Providence. His voice was steady, slow, deliberate. I'm guessing you've met my old passengers. Ethan stiffened. Jonas, he whispered, horror flashing across his face. Logan's pistol stayed aimed. Used to? He asked. Jonas smirked faintly. She's half underwater now, thanks to your storm. He looked at Ethan with cold familiarity. Still alive, are you? Thought the sea might have done my work for me. Ranger growled louder now, positioning himself between the two men. Jonas looked down at the dog and chuckled. Smart one. Knows trouble when he smells it. Logan's mind raced. The pieces were moving too fast to fit together. You came back here, why? He asked. Jonas shrugged. Didn't have much choice. My partner's dead, the ship's broken, and there's something on this island I'm not leaving without. His eyes flicked to Ethan. He knows what. Ethan pushed himself up with his crutch, shaking. You don't have to do this, he said. Jonas's smile didn't reach his eyes. I think I do. You cost me a fortune, boy. Before Logan could react, Jonas's hand went to his belt too fast for a man his age. Logan fired a warning shot, the bullet hissing into the dirt by Jonas's boot. Next one's higher, Logan warned. Jonas froze, then slowly raised both hands. His expression didn't change. If anything, he looked amused. So the soldier still knows how to shoot. The tension thickened. The rain poured harder now, masking smaller sounds like the faint click of metal behind Logan. Ranger barked a sharp warning just as Ethan lunged from behind, swinging his crutch like a club. Logan turned in time to deflect the blow, the crutch snapping against his arm. Ranger leapt, tackling Ethan to the ground, teeth sinking into his sleeve. The lantern fell, crashing into the mud and extinguishing the light. For several seconds, chaos rained rain, shouting, the metallic ring of a gun kicked away. Logan rolled, caught Ethan's wrist, twisted it until he cried out. Jonas vanished into the darkness, his footsteps swallowed by the storm. Logan pinned Ethan down, breathing hard, his forearm pressing against the man's throat. You lied, he said through clenched teeth. Ethan gasped. You don't understand, she made me, Clara. But Logan's patience had burned away. You're done lying, he growled. He stood, still holding the pistol, scanning the trees for any sign of Jonas. Nothing but rain. Ranger panted beside him, muzzle smeared with mud, but uninjured. The fire was out, the camp reduced to shadows. Logan holstered the gun and looked down at Ethan, who lay coughing in the dirt, eyes wild with something between fear and regret. You're going to tell me everything, Logan said. About Clara, about Jonas, about why this island feels like a grave. Ethan didn't answer. He just whispered, barely audible, It already is. The rain drowned out the rest. But Logan didn't need to hear more. He could feel it. The island wasn't done with them yet. The dawn came quietly, a thin blade of pale light cutting through the clouds that hung over the northern ridge. Mist clung low to the trees, thick as breath on glass. Logan stood at the edge of the forest, his face cold and expressionless as he adjusted the strap of his rifle. Ranger sat beside him, motionless but alert, his amber eyes trained on the faint trail of footprints that wound through the wet sand ahead. The smell of diesel grew stronger, with every gust of wind a sour, metallic stench that mixed with salt and decay. Logan crouched and touched the ground. The print was deep, wide, and fresh, heavy boots. Someone had passed through less than an hour ago. He glanced at Ranger. "Let's move," he murmured. They followed the trail along the shoreline, the sound of waves muffled by the morning fog. Logan moved with the silent efficiency of old training, every step deliberate, every motion controlled. The Navy SEAL in him, buried for years under guilt and isolation, had returned without invitation. His mind was clear, sharp. The island was no longer just a place. It was a battlefield. Ranger padded ahead, occasionally stopping to sniff the air, his fur bristling slightly each time the wind shifted. The scent of oil grew overpowering until they crested a small rise and saw it below a rusting trawler, half buried against the rocks of the northern cove. Its hull bore faded white letters, the Providence. The ship was tilted, its deck slick with seawater and blackened fuel. Smoke curled faintly from the stern, where an engine struggled against its own death. Logan studied it through the mist. The structure was intact enough to hold people, though the rust told a story of years at sea, smuggling and survival. "Looks like hell, huh, Ranger?" he muttered. The shepherd gave a low, quiet growl. Logan took that as agreement. He approached cautiously, keeping low, moving from rock to rock. The closer he got, the more details emerged. Crates stacked, along the deck, ropes tangled like veins, and near the open hatch, a man. He was tall and broad, built like a dockworker, with a thick neck and forearms scarred from years of labor. His greasy brown hair was tied back, and a faded tattoo of a serpent wound down his left arm. He was muttering to himself while hammering at a broken engine part, his voice a low, irritated growl. Logan recognized the type immediately. Mercenary muscle, dangerous, but not disciplined. Logan moved closer, the sound of waves masking his approach. He slipped a small knife from his belt, the handle worn smooth by years of use. In one swift motion, he grabbed the man from behind, covering his mouth as he drove the knife into his side, not deep enough to kill, but enough to silence. The man's eyes widened with shock before rolling back as he collapsed. Logan eased him down, breath steady. Ranger stayed by the hatch, head tilted, ears twitching. Then, faintly, from below deck, came a sound, a thud, followed by a muffled cry. Logan froze, another thud. Then a voice, barely audible, trembling with desperation. "Help, please." He exchanged a look with Ranger. The dog's fur was raised, his body tense but ready. Logan descended the ladder into the ship's belly. The air was thick with oil, fumes, and rot. Light filtered through cracks in the metal hull, cutting pale strips across the darkness. He moved quietly past hanging ropes and broken crates until the voice came again, closer this time. At the far end of the corridor was a locked door, its metal surface rusted but recently scratched, as if someone had clawed at it. Logan tested the handle, it held firm. He pulled a crowbar from the wall and wedged it into the hinge. With a grunt, he forced the door open. It screeched in protest, the sound echoing through the hull like a scream. Inside was a small compartment, reeking of salt, fuel, and fear. Two people sat bound to the wall with coarse rope. One was a woman, her dark hair tangled, her skin pale and bruised. Despite the dirt and exhaustion, her face still carried a quiet strength. Her eyes, gray like storm clouds, widened when she saw him. Who are you?" she whispered. The man beside her was older, in his early 40s, his beard ragged, his clothes torn. His wrists were raw from the ropes, his breathing shallow. Logan recognized the name before the faces. "Clara Monroe," he said softly. "And your husband, Ethan." The woman's lips trembled. "You know us?" "I read your journal," Logan replied. He knelt and began cutting their ropes with his knife. "You've been here a while." Clara winced as the rope gave way, her hands shaking. "They took our supplies, said they'd bring help, then they came back with guns." She looked past Logan toward the ladder. "Is Jonas still here?" Logan's jaw tightened. "He was," he said. "Not anymore, but he'll be back." Ethan groaned weakly, his head lolling. Logan turned, saw him slightly, and saw the damage, a deep cut along his shoulder and a swollen bruise at his temple. "He needs medical attention," Logan muttered. "We'll get him out." Clara reached for his arm, gripping it weakly. "Please, don't let him find us again. He's not just after money. There's something else. Something on this ship." Her voice faltered. Logan frowned. "What kind of something? What?" Before she could answer, Ranger growled from above deck, a deep, warning sound that vibrated through the metal floor. Logan's instincts snapped to full alert. "Stay quiet," he whispered. He moved to the ladder, peered upward through the opening, and saw shadows shifting in the fog. Two voices, low and hurried, arguing in rough tones. Jonas had not come alone. He climbed halfway up the ladder, crouched low. Through the mist, two men approached the trawler from the rocks. One was young, thin, with a narrow face and restless movements, a jittery type. The other was tall and clean-shaven, his expression hard, military even. The second man carried a rifle slung across his chest and moved with the discipline of someone trained to use it. "We need to get the crates," the tall one said, voice clipped. Jonas said, "Leave nothing." Ranger's growl deepened. Logan whispered, "Quiet." He waited until the men stepped onto the deck, then moved. The first went down instantly. Logan slammed the butt of his pistol into the back of his skull. The second spun, rifle rising. Logan ducked behind a crate as the shot rang out, splintering the wood. Ranger lunged, teeth clamping onto the man's arm, dragging him sideways. The rifle clattered away. Logan closed the distance and struck, knocking the man unconscious. Silence returned, broken only by the rain. Logan exhaled and glanced at Ranger. "Good work." The shepherd wagged his tail once, before turning back toward the hatch. Logan descended again and gestured to Clara. "We're leaving, now." Together, they climbed out into the pale morning. Clara's steps were weak, but determined. She looked at her husband, leaning on Logan's shoulder, and whispered, "You came back for us." Logan didn't answer. He scanned the shoreline, the fog beginning to thin. In the distance, a faint echo, a motor, far out at sea. Jonas was returning. He turned to Clara. "We need cover before he finds the ship. There's a ridge west of here. You can hide there until I finish this." Clara met his eyes, her voice trembling but resolute. "Finish what?" Logan looked out toward the sound of the engine, his expression hard as stone. "Making sure this island doesn't take anyone else." The wind carried the smell of fuel and rain as the trawler groaned under the rising tide. Ranger stood at the bow, ears raised, ready for whatever came next. The light was dying fast. The last streaks of orange faded behind the cliffs as the sea darkened into ink. Logan pushed through the dripping undergrowth, his breath steady, but his senses sharp. Each footstep crunched on the wet pine needles, and every rustle of leaves sounded too close. Behind him, Clara half supported her husband as they struggled along the forest path. Ethan leaned heavily on her shoulder, pale and trembling, his every step leaving a dark print on the muddy trail. Ranger moved ahead, his fur slick from rain, nose to the ground, ears flicking at every faint sound. They had left the trawler less than an hour ago, but it felt like days. The memory of the ship's creaking hull and the stench of oil still clung to them like ghosts. Logan stopped and motioned for silence. He crouched beside a fallen log and scanned the darkness behind them. The fog had begun to rise again, thick and creeping low, and somewhere far off, he thought he heard the faint echo of an engine. Sputtering, Jonas was on the move. Clara's whisper broke the stillness. "Is he following us?" Logan didn't answer right away. He watched the tree line a moment longer before turning back. "He will be. Men like him don't give up what they think they own." His voice was quiet, measured. Clara nodded, swallowing hard. There was fear in her eyes, but also something else, resolve. They rested briefly beside a moss-covered boulder. Logan tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it to Ethan's wound. "Keep pressure here," he said. Ethan gritted his teeth and nodded weakly. Up close, Logan could see the man's face clearer, now once handsome, now drawn thin, cheekbones sharp from hunger and stress. His hands trembled as he tried to adjust the bandage, his nails still blackened from rope burns. "He's lost a lot of blood," Logan muttered. Clara's reply was a whisper, cracked with exhaustion. "He's stronger than he looks. He survived worse at sea." Logan studied her, then really looked at her. Clara Monroe was around 30, with deep gray eyes that seemed older than her years. Her long hair, once auburn, was now tangled and streaked with mud. Her clothes, a torn navy raincoat and jeans, clung to her like a second skin, but her posture was steady. She had the air of someone who had been afraid for too long and had learned to keep moving anyway. After a moment, Logan spoke again. "You said there were two of them, Victor and Cole." Clara hesitated, then nodded slowly. "They came after the storm. Their boat was smaller, just a rusted fishing vessel. They said they were stranded like us. But I knew from the start they weren't." She took a shaky breath. Victor was the one who talked. He was tall, heavy-set, with pale eyes, the kind that never blink. He liked to act friendly, to smile too much. But when he smiled, his hand always stayed near his knife. Cole was different, she continued. Younger, quiet. His hair was blonde, almost white. I think he was ex-military too. The way he moved, the way he watched everything. But he followed Victor like a shadow. Never spoke unless told. Logan nodded slowly, filing the names away. "And they took your ship?" Clara's eyes darkened. "They said it was for repairs. They lied. They wanted the cargo." She looked away, voice trembling. "There were sealed containers in the hold, Jonas's, we found out later. He was using the Providence to move weapons along the coast. When the storm hit, they thought we were a liability. They locked us up." Ethan stirred, his voice hoarse. "Victor, he wasn't careful. He came into the cabin one night to threaten Clara. I still had a metal file from my toolkit. I used it." He winced, touching his leg, as if the memory still hurt. "I hit him in the thigh. He screamed and nearly bled out, but he didn't die." Clara took over softly. "That's when everything changed. He made Cole tie us tighter. He said if anyone ever came, he'd make us bait." Her eyes found Logan's. "When you flew over yesterday, he heard your engine. He told Cole it was their chance. He'd pretend to be a survivor, the man who got away. He said he could play weak better than anyone." Logan exhaled, jaw tightening. "He did," he said flatly. "And he nearly made me believe it." The forest grew darker by the minute. The fog had thickened into a gray wall. Ranger halted suddenly, muscles tensed, head low. Logan raised a hand for silence. A faint metallic sound came from somewhere behind them, a weapon being cocked. Then, through the mist, a voice. "You can stop running now, soldier." Jonas stepped out of the fog, like a shadow given shape. His face was streaked with grime, his coat soaked, but his eyes gleamed with a cruel, tired intelligence. He held a revolver steady in his right hand, the other clutching a flare that painted his face, red in the gloom. Behind him, another figure emerged, Cole, young and wiry, exactly as Clara had described. His blonde hair was plastered to his forehead, his rifle glinting faintly in the half-light. His expression was tense, uncertain, like someone who'd seen too much violence, but still followed orders. Jonas's grin was small and humorless. "You've been busy," he said, "cleaning up my ship, killing my men." His voice carried the rhythm of command, the kind that came from years of getting his way. Logan said nothing. He kept his body between Jonas and the Monroes, his gun holstered but ready. Ranger growled, low and deadly. "Let them go," Logan said finally. "You don't need them." Jonas's laugh was harsh. "Need them? No, but they owe me. And you?" He pointed the revolver. "You've cost me everything else." Logan's stance didn't shift. "You're outnumbered." Jonas smirked. You think Cole here won't shoot? He's a good boy. Lost his brother in Fallujah. Found a new one in me. He turned slightly toward the younger man. Ain't that right, son? Cole's jaw clenched. His eyes flicked to Clara, then to Ranger, then back to Jonas. There was something fractured in his gaze. He didn't answer. Jonas noticed, and his smile thinned. Go on then, he barked. Do what I pay you for. Cole's hands trembled. She's not part of this, he muttered. Jonas's voice sharpened, slicing through the fog. She is now. In that heartbeat, everything moved. Logan ducked as the revolver flashed, the bullet tearing through a tree trunk behind him. Ranger lunged forward, slamming into Jonas's side. The flare fell, sputtering red sparks across the wet ground. Cole hesitated, then turned his rifle toward Jonas, not Logan. The shot rang out, echoing through the forest. Jonas stumbled backward, eyes wide, a bloom of crimson spreading across his chest. He dropped to his knees, a look of disbelief, frozen on his face, before he collapsed into the mud. Silence followed, thick and endless, broken only by the hiss of the dying flare. Cole stood still, the rifle shaking in his hands. I'm done, he whispered. No more. Logan watched him closely but saw no deception in the young man's face, only a hollow grief. Clara turned away, clutching Ethan as tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. Logan stepped forward and gently kicked the revolver out of Jonas's reach. Then he looked at Cole. You have a choice, he said quietly. You can help us get off this island, or die here with him. Cole's eyes met his, red-rimmed and haunted. After a long moment, he nodded once. The wind shifted, scattering the mist. The forest seemed to breathe again. Logan holstered his gun, called softly to Ranger, and looked at the horizon, where the faintest hint of dawn began to glow behind the clouds. The storm had passed, leaving behind a bruised sky and the sound of the sea breathing heavy against the rocks. Logan guided Clara and Ethan carefully down the slippery path toward the southern cove, where his old wooden boat, Mariner's Rest, bobbed weakly against the tide. The dawn was thin, gray light stretching across the horizon, but his mind was still wrapped in the fog of battle. Every instinct told him it wasn't over, not yet. Ranger moved ahead, his fur glistening with seawater, nose twitching in the salt-heavy air. The German shepherd's gait was steady but restless, as if he too felt the danger pressing close behind. Clara stumbled as she reached the shoreline, exhaustion catching up with her. Logan steadied her, his rough hand gentle against her arm. Just a little further, he said quietly. Ethan followed behind, limping, one hand pressed to his bandaged leg. His face was drawn and pale, but his eyes burned with a survivor's stubborn light. I thought I'd never see open water again, he murmured. Logan gave a faint smile. Let's make sure we don't have to swim. They reached the boat and began climbing aboard. The deck creaked beneath their weight. Logan untied the rope, his movements quick but careful, scanning the coastline one last time. The island loomed behind them, shrouded in morning mist, a shape both haunting and hollow, like a place built from memory. He turned the key in the ignition. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared weakly to life. Ranger barked once, short and sharp, as if to signal their departure. Hold on, Logan said, pushing the throttle. The boat began to pull away from shore, the bow slicing through the low waves. For the first time since the storm began, Logan felt the fragile promise of safety. Clara leaned into Ethan, her head on his shoulder, whispering something too soft to hear. Ranger sat by the cabin door, ears perked, eyes locked on the mist, trailing them. Then, a sound cracked through the air. A single gunshot. The echo rolled over the water, sharp and cruel. Logan spun around. From the fog-shrouded shoreline, a figure emerged, limping, drenched in blood. Victor. He looked almost inhuman now, his face twisted by rage, one eye swollen shut, blood matting his hair against his skull. His soaked clothes clung to his massive frame, revealing the raw muscle beneath. In one trembling hand, he held a pistol. In the other, A deep wound bled freely through a ripped pant leg. His voice, when it came, was a guttural roar. "You left me." Logan froze, his body instinctively shifting between the Monroes and the threat. "Put it down, Victor," he called, voice steady but low. "It's over." Victor's laughter echoed, jagged and bitter. "Over? You think I'll drown here while you get to sail away? You took everything, my ship, my crew, my chance." He raised the pistol with both hands, eyes burning with a feral light. Clara gasped, clutching Ethan's arm. Logan didn't move. He had faced gunmen before, seen the tremor of desperation that came before death. But this man, this broken remnant, was running on nothing but vengeance and pride. "You pull that trigger, you won't make it another minute," Logan warned. Victor gritted his teeth. "Maybe not," he snarled, "but neither will you." He squeezed the trigger. The shot never reached its mark. Ranger lunged from the deck, a blur of tan and black fur, hitting the sand with all the force his body could muster. The German shepherd slammed into Victor's injured leg, knocking him off balance. The gun fired wild. The bullet hissed past Logan's ear and splashed harmlessly into the sea. Victor roared in pain, swinging the gun down wildly, but Ranger was faster. He sank his teeth into the man's wrist, twisting until the pistol fell into the surf. The fight was brief, but brutal, a snarl, a crash. And then Victor lay face down in the sand, groaning. Logan vaulted from the boat, landing hard beside them. "Ranger, off!" he ordered, and the dog released instantly, stepping back but staying ready. Logan kicked the gun further out into the shallows, then knelt beside Victor. The man's eyes were wide now, fear overtaking fury. "You should have stayed down," Logan said quietly. The sound that followed was unexpected, the rhythmic chop of blades cutting through the mist. Logan looked up, squinting toward the horizon. Out of the fog, a U.S. Coast Guard helicopter appeared, its red and white body gleaming against the gray sky. The downdraft whipped the sea into spirals, scattering spray across the cove. Two crewmen descended on harnesses, their orange suits bright against the gloom. One, Lieutenant Mark Reeves, was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-30s, with close-cropped blonde hair and a square jaw hardened by years of rescue missions. His voice carried easily over the roar of the rotor. "Coast Guard, we picked up. Your distress signal. Everyone all right?" Logan shielded his eyes from the wind. "3 survivors," he shouted back. "And 2 suspects, 1 dead, 1 wounded." Reeves nodded and motioned to his partner, a woman named Chief Petty Officer Dana Briggs, tall and lean, with dark skin and sharp, focused eyes. She moved with efficient precision, securing Ethan first with a harness, then helping Clara aboard. Her tone was brisk, but kind. "You're safe now, ma'am." Clara's lips trembled, but she nodded, clutching Ethan's hand tightly as they were lifted toward the helicopter. When the harness returned, Logan gestured to Victor's prone body. "He goes next." Reeves raised an eyebrow but complied, signaling to the crew above. Victor was barely conscious as they strapped him in. His head lolled sideways, his voice slurred. You don't know what was on that ship." Then he passed out. Logan watched him ascend, dangling helplessly against the gray, morning sky. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind and the whir of the helicopter blades. Then Reeves turned to Logan. "You coming with us, sir?" Logan looked at the sea stretching endlessly beyond the mist, then at Ranger, who sat beside him, eyes calm, steady, waiting. "We'll take our own way back," he said. Reeves studied him for a moment, understanding flickering in his expression. He nodded once. "You've done enough." As the helicopter lifted higher, carrying Clara and Ethan to safety, Logan stood watching until the red light disappeared into the clouds. The silence that followed was deep and clean, the kind of silence that once haunted him, now somehow peaceful. Ranger nudged his hand, pressing his wet nose against his palm. Logan smiled faintly. "Yeah, boy," he murmured. "It's over." He turned toward Mariner's Rest, its paint chipped but familiar, its sails trembling in the soft wind. The horizon had begun to glow, the first true light of dawn cutting through the mist. Logan climbed aboard, started the engine, and looked back once at the island fading behind them. "Let's go home, Ranger." The boat drifted forward, slicing through the calm sea. Above them, gulls wheeled and cried, their voices carrying across the open water like blessings. And as the morning sun broke over the horizon, two silhouettes stood against the light, a soldier and his loyal friend, no longer running, no longer lost. Sometimes, miracles don't come as blinding lights from the heavens. They come quietly, through small acts of courage, loyalty, and love. Logan and Ranger's journey wasn't just about survival. It was about finding faith again, the kind that whispers in the heart when the world goes silent. Maybe that's how God works, not always through thunder or fire, but through the moments when we choose kindness, forgiveness, and hope. In every storm, there's a hand reaching for us, even if we don't see it. If this story touched you, share it with someone who might need a reminder that miracles still happen in the quiet corners of life. Leave a comment below, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and redemption. May God bless you and keep you safe wherever your journey leads.